The desert can be a beautiful place, but it can also be a graveyard for the unwary. I've seen things that still haunt my dreams, things that make the sand feel like it's closing in around me. I want to share 3 stories, 3 true desert horrors that I lived through, tales that remind me of how fragile life can be when surrounded by endless miles of desolation. The first story takes me back to a sweltering summer day in the Mojave Desert. I was part of a small group of friends, eager to explore the rugged beauty of the landscape. We had heard about an old ghost town, a place where time seemed to stand still. The excitement of adventure overshadowed any caution we might have felt. We packed our supplies, filled our water bottles, and set out early in the morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The drive was long, and the landscape shifted from scrubby bushes to vast stretches of sand. As we neared the ghost town, the air grew thick with anticipation. We parked the car and stepped out into the heat, the sun beating down mercilessly. The town was a collection of dilapidated buildings, remnants of a time long gone. We wandered through the streets, taking pictures and laughing, the thrill of exploration coursing through us. But as the day wore on, the laughter faded. The sun climbed higher, and the heat became oppressive. We hadn't planned for how quickly the desert could drain our energy. We found ourselves wandering further from the car, driven by curiosity but not thinking about the consequences. It wasn't until we decided to head back that we realized something was wrong. The landscape, which had seemed so welcoming, now felt like a maze. The buildings looked different, and the sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows that twisted and turned. Panic set in as we retraced our steps, but nothing looked familiar. We called out to each other, but the vastness of the desert swallowed our voices. With every turn, the feeling of being watched crept over me. I could feel the weight of the sand, the silence amplifying our fear. The sun was sinking lower and the temperature was dropping, but the dread in my chest was heating up. Then we heard it. A low, guttural sound that echoed through the empty streets. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a mix of a growl and a whisper. We froze, our hearts racing. The sound seemed to come from all around us, reverberating off the walls of the abandoned buildings. We huddled together, fear coursing through our veins. I felt a primal instinct to run, to escape whatever was lurking in the shadows. In a moment of sheer panic, we sprinted toward what we thought was the direction of the car. The sound followed us, growing louder, more insistent. It felt like we were being hunted. I glanced back, half expecting to see something monstrous emerging from the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the empty streets and the fading light. Finally, we spotted the car, and relief surged through us. We jumped inside, slamming the doors shut. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking as I tried to start the engine. The growling sound was now a distant echo, but the fear lingered. We drove away, the ghost town shrinking in the rearview mirror, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we had disturbed something ancient, something that was never meant to be awakened. The second story is set in the arid expanse of the Sonoran Desert, where I worked as a guide for a hiking group. It was supposed to be a routine trip, leading a small group of tourists through the stunning landscape. The sun was shining brightly, and the cacti stood tall against the blue sky. Everything seemed perfect. As we trekked deeper into the desert, I noticed one of the tourists, a young woman lagging behind. I called out to her, but she waved me off, insisting she was fine. I kept moving, confident she would catch up. But as we reached a particularly beautiful viewpoint, I turned around and realized she was still missing. A sense of unease settled in my stomach. I decided to backtrack, calling her name as I walked. The desert was eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. I scanned the area, but there was no sign of her. Panic began to rise in my chest as I envisioned the worst. I gathered the rest of the group and explained the situation. We split up, searching for her, calling her name, but there was no response. Time slipped away as the sun began to dip toward the horizon. The shadows stretched longer, and the temperature dropped sharply. I felt a chill creep into my bones, not just from the cold, but from the growing realization that we might not find her. The desert had a way of swallowing people whole, and I feared she was lost. As night fell, we regrouped at the last spot where we had seen her. With flashlights in hand, we scanned the area, but it felt like we were searching in vain. The darkness enveloped us, and the vastness of the desert became suffocating. Then, just as despair began to settle in, we heard a faint cry. It was distant, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. We followed the sound, our hearts pounding in our chests. The cries grew louder, more frantic, and we hurried toward them. I felt a mix of hope and dread as we pushed through the underbrush. Finally, we found her, sitting on the ground, her face pale and her eyes wide with terror. She was disoriented, mumbling about shadows that moved and voices that called her name. We helped her to her feet, but she seemed different, as if a part of her had been lost to the desert. The way she looked at us was unsettling, her eyes filled with a fear that went beyond what she had just experienced. As we made our way back to the car, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed us, something dark and unseen. The last story is the most chilling, one that still sends shivers down my spine. It happened during a solo camping trip in the New Mexico desert. I had always loved the solitude of the desert, the quiet nights under the stars. I set up my tent in a secluded spot, surrounded by the beauty of the landscape. As darkness descended, I built a small fire and settled in with a book, the crackling flames providing comfort against the vastness of the night. But as I read, I began to feel a presence, an unsettling feeling that I wasn't alone. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just the isolation playing tricks on my mind. I finished my book and lay back on my sleeping bag, staring up at the stars. That's when I heard it, a soft rustling sound, like footsteps in the sand. I sat up, straining to listen. The sound continued, growing closer. My heart raced as I reached for my flashlight, shining it toward the noise. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the area around my campsite. But there was nothing there, just the stillness of the desert night. I tried to convince myself it was just an animal, perhaps a coyote or a rabbit. But the rustling persisted, a creeping sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I felt exposed, vulnerable in my little tent, surrounded by the vast emptiness. I decided to step outside, hoping to reassure myself that everything was fine. As I emerged from the tent, the air felt charged, electric. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. I called out, my voice trembling slightly, but there was no reply. The rustling had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence. I scanned the area, my flashlight beam dancing over the sand and rocks, but still I saw nothing. Then I felt it, a cold breeze sweeping through the campsite, chilling me to the bone. It carried with it a whisper, a voice that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. It called my name, soft and beckoning, and I froze. The sound was unmistakable, a haunting melody that sent shivers down my spine. I stumbled back into the tent, my heart pounding, and tried to calm myself. I told myself it was just the wind, just my imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I lay there, wide awake, listening to the silence, waiting for dawn to break. The night dragged on and the whispers continued, taunting me, echoing in my mind. When the first light of dawn finally broke over the horizon, I packed my things in a frenzy, desperate to leave that place behind. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing, just the empty desert stretching out behind me. These 3 stories are etched in my memory, reminders of the desert's power and mystery. Each experience taught me a lesson about respect, about the thin line between curiosity and danger. The desert can be a beautiful place, but it holds secrets that can turn a simple adventure into a nightmare. I've learned to tread carefully, to listen to the whispers of the wind, and to never underestimate the darkness that can lurk just beyond the light.